Hello and welcome to Maximum Disc, a show where I celebrate physical media and talk about films that I own on Blu Ray and 4K Blu Ray. I'm James Adamson. I'm a co-host on the Double Reel Film Podcast. If you like this chat about physical media, please do check out Double Reel. It's a magazine-style podcast made by people who love movies as much as you do. Each episode we talk about various topics and films, and we think that you listen to one, you'll come away with a bunch of great recommendations of things to watch instead of what the algorithm tells you to do. But that's enough sales pitch for the podcast. We're here to talk about physical media today. And why do I do that? I guess because it matters. I think it's really important these days. You know, people were talking about physical media dying out, but I think it's enjoying a bit of a resurgence. That's because people have seen the limitations of streaming, what's available, the version that it's available in, whether it looks and sounds the way that it should. And, you know, if you own it on disc on your shelf, then you're in more control of it. There's been a court case recently saying that when you've bought something on Amazon, even if you buy it on a digital copy, you don't really own it. And I think that just reinforces the case for being a bit of a geek like me and wanting the physical disc on my shelf so that I can watch it any time that I want. And hopefully if you're tuning into this, then you're the same. And what I do on this show is each episode I talk about one film that I own. Talk about the format, the case, what kind of, sound and vision quality you're going to get. That's what the main sort of meat of it is for most people. They want to know if the film they're about to buy on disc is a good representation of the film that they loved on the big screen when they watched it for the first time. So I do that. I'm not the most technical in my coverage of it, but I like to think I give you a decent view of that. I also talk about my relationship to the film, how I came to love it, own it, what it all means to me. And kind of round it up at the end by saying whether I think this is an essential purchase and hopefully help you make your mind up about whether it's an essential purchase for you. This episode, we're talking about Once Upon a Time in America in extended cut, the 250-minute version on Blu Ray, which is a big one. This is a major film. You'll see that I've got that poster on my wall behind me. This is a big one for me. I'm really excited to get into this. So starting with the information about the film, it came out in 1984. It was the final film directed by Sergio Leone, who apart from this film is best known for his so-called spaghetti westerns. Good, the Bad and the Ugly, Fistful of Dollars for a Few Dollars More. Perhaps his sort of big statement on that at the time was Once Upon a Time in the West. He's also credited as a co-writer on this film, along with a number of fellow Italian writers, Leonardo Benvenuti, Piero de Bernardi, Enrico Medioli, Franco Arcali, and Franco Ferrini. The American crime writer Stuart Kaminsky was brought in to write the English language dialogue because the film is in English, even though Leone didn't speak it. Pretty good cast, to say the least. Robert De Niro in the lead role, along with James Woods, Elizabeth McGovern, Tuesday Weld as the leading characters. There's all sorts of other recognisable faces in the supporting cast, including Danny Aiello, Jennifer Connelly in an early role, William Forsythe, Burt Young, Joe Pesci, Treat Williams, and Darlan Flugel, who you'll know from another, films like To Live and Die in LA and other kind of 1980s mainstay films. The director of photography was Tonino Delli-Colli, a very influential Italian cinematographer who worked with Leone a number of times, including The Good, the Bad and the Ugly and Once Upon a Time in the West. He's also worked with a number of major European directors alongside him, such as Pier Paolo Pasolini and Louis Malle. A large number of people are credited with working on the sound, as you'd imagine, especially different versions and restorations that needed engineers to be brought in for them. My best guess at the leading names, because there were no awards nominations for sound in this film, would be the sound and engineer Jean-Pierre Roux and sound effects supervisor Renato Marinelli. In terms of sound, the score is absolutely crucial to the film for reasons we'll get into. It's by the legendary Ennio Morricone, who was responsible for scoring all of Sergio Leone's films from Fistful of Dollars onwards. The other directors whose films he's worked on is a who's who of the biggest names in the business, including John Huston, Brian De Palma, John Carpenter, Dario Argento, Bernardo Bertolucci, and, of course, Quentin Tarantino. It was with Tarantino that he finally won a well-deserved Oscar for Best Score for The Hateful Eight, after Tarantino had used Morricone's music a number of times in his previous films. He also did amazing work, and I'm going to bang on about Morricone a bit on this episode. He also did amazing work that deserves to be checked out on films such as Cinema Paradiso, The Battle of Algiers, and The Mission. So in terms of awards and nominations, we're going to get into the history of the film, which which really is troubled when it was made and meant it didn't get as much recognition as it deserved when it was released. There's a lot to that. You might know some of this story already. It was completely overlooked by the Oscars. It did win 2 BAFTAs, one for costume design and one for Ennio Morricone's score. It also got a few nominations in Italy and 1 or 2 other awards associations in Europe, where it got a better release than it did in America, but not a great return for a film with this reputation, especially a reputation that grew and developed in later years. Okay, so to talk about what this film is about, this is Sergio Leone's entry in the gangster genre. It's a hugely epic, part historical drama, part character study, part gangster film. It's part of what Leone saw as a loose trilogy that he started with Once Upon a Time in the West in 1968 and followed it up with a film with a number of different titles such as Giulia Testa and Fistful of Dynamite, and then this. And each of these films gives his take on key moments in the history of North America. Once Upon a Time in the West covers how the Wild West as we know it was changed forever by the arrival of the railroads and big business interests and corruption. And his final statement on the Western, as it were. Giulia Testa is about the Mexican Revolution, which is, quite a key moment in North American history anyway. And Once Upon a Time in America is, like a lot of films about gangsters, it is talking about the flip side of the American dream, but he goes much further into that and into American history and a number of other things that really is such a massive statement on America and gangster films and so many things. It covers a huge time frame from 1918 through to 1968. It starts with De Niro's main character, nicknamed Noodles, in the 1930s, so the middle of the overall timeline of this film, hiding in a New York opium den, reeling from the deaths of his fellow gangsters and friends. He just informed on them to the police for reasons which become apparent later. He's hunted by gangsters connected to some of the things that they were up to. He escapes into obscurity at that time. The money that he wanted to take with him when he escaped had been stolen, which is a mystery to him because the only people who should have access to it are him and his friends, all of whom he thought had just been killed. You then flash forward 35 years later to the late 1960s. De Niro's character Noodles is an old man. Someone appears to have found him, contacts him anonymously, so he comes back to New York to find out what's going on and also to reckon with the consequences of his criminal past. It then flashes back to 1918, the start of the timeline of the movie, when Noodles and his pals are like in their early teen years. They're street urchins growing up in poverty in the Jewish neighborhood of New York City. We see their entry into the world of organised crime. They are, brave. They've got some bright ideas. They duck and dive and rise to become rich and powerful gangsters in the Prohibition era. And the relationship between the friends when they're boys is as important as their kind of rise to kind of power and wealth and becoming bigger and worse criminals. The very complex narrative of this film cuts between these 3 eras at different times. So chronologically, it follows the rise of the young gangsters, Noodles, Max, Cockeye, Dominic, and Patsy, their friend Fat Mo, whose sister Deborah Noodles is in love with. You see their rise to power as organised crime figures, controlling the police and the unions, then divisions, falling out, the eventual downfall, and then it jumps to 35 years later, a much older Noodles trying to find out what really happened. And it's about coming to terms with all the terrible crimes he committed, the people he hurt, the despicable things he did in the name of money, power, and personal greed. That's what happens chronologically, but the film cuts backwards and forwards between these time periods as De Niro's memory is struck by things that he sees or finds out. You see what's preying on his mind and what really might have gone on back in the day. It's got a famously ambiguous ending, which is much debated, and the whole thing is Leone's magnum opus of storytelling, politics, sumptuous visuals, Morricone's music. It's the summation of all the things they did together using music and mood and violence and memory. If you look at something like Once Upon a Time in the West and also a fistful of dollars and for a few dollars more, there's a lot of kind of different, stylistic touches that he's working on, a lot of flashbacks into those films as well. And more than any other gangster film, it's meditation on the corruption of the American dream and on greed and regret. Now, we've seen those things in a lot of other films. We've seen the very Shakespearean take on that in The Godfather. Leone does something very different and new with this, and it's the pace and mood and style of the film that really brings home how long Noodles has been living with all the things that he'd done, the terrible things that he did. He's a murderer. He's a rapist. He's a ruthless, pursuer of greed and wealth and power, and he's corrupted everything he's touched. And he's had a long time to think about that, and the film really brings that home. Something that's really important is the masterful editing by regular Leone collaborator Nino Baragli, weaving together these different time periods. It adds on layers of meaning and resonance each time it returns to a key moment. For example, a lot of it you just move from one time to another and more is revealed. At other times it shows you an event again that you've seen once before, but now you know a lot more about what it means. It's beautifully done. Some of the edits are absolutely masterful. One moment that the boys are looking at a slogan above the Young Offenders Institute that Noodles has just been sent to in 1920 or something like that, early 20s, and then it flash forwards to the late 60s, and Noodles says, the old man De Niro was looking at a similar inscription on a mausoleum containing the bodies of his dead friends that have been dead for decades while he's been hiding out. Absolutely stunning. So, I've been waxing lyrical about this film. What my background with it is it's kind of a long story, like this film. I was only vaguely aware of it to begin with. Its release in 1984 was not a success, no fanfare, no discussion that I was aware of. I mean, I was still a kid, but I was a regular in my local video shop and I was looking out for everything. I saw it on the shelves. It was 18 rated. I probably wouldn't be able to persuade my mum to let me watch it. There was nothing on there that made it really jump out at me. I just didn't know what was going on with it. It sort of rose without a trace, as they once said about F. Murray Abraham in another film that came out this year. Now, over time, I became aware of Sergio Leone through his Dollars trilogy with Clint Eastwood. And eventually I got to this film as his final film and big statement. I got to watch it in the version that Leone intended, either on TV or on a video rental, and watched it and realised what a classic it was. This is sometime in the 90s, but it's the proper 4-hour version. We'll get into versions in a minute. I was instantly bowled over. It very quickly became my favourite film of all time. It's remained so ever since. I've never seen anything else like it. I genuinely believe this is the greatest film ever made. I believe that cinema is the greatest art form of the 20th century, and I think this is the greatest work of art that's ever been made in the cinema. The performances, the music, the set design, this longing, haunting, carefully paced portrayal of its main character, the way it jumps between time periods, it's just so special. And nothing like this has ever kind of given you the impression of a character who's had 30 years to regret pretty much everything he's done in his life while still making the film hugely compelling. You get a little bit of that in Godfather 2 and 3, where for 2 minutes you see the aftermath of everything that's happened to Michael's character. But this is the best portrayal I've ever seen of a man living with his guilt. Now, I'm not exactly the world's leading scholar on the movie, but I have read up and heard all the stories. Christopher Frayling wrote a brilliant book about Sergio Leone called Something to Do with Death. It's got an amazing chapter detailing what happened to this film. Leone spent 15 years trying to get it made. Essentially what happened was he was pretty productive in the 60s and the beginning of the 70s. He did all the spaghetti westerns. He did Once Upon a Time in the West. He did Julia Tester in 71. And he spent the rest of the rest of the 70s and some of the 80s trying to make this film. It was hard to get it financed or get a studio to agree to make it. This film cost about the same amount to make as Return to the Jedi. I don't think you can imagine like a violent gangster film that's 4 hours long and has this kind of complex structure, costing blockbuster money today. So it's a very unique moment. In 1972, he was offered the director's job on the original Godfather film before Coppola got it, but he turned it down because he was working on his own gangster film, this one. Who knew it would be another 12 years before we got to see this? All the other stories about the making of the film are legend. Morricone wrote the score from reading the script, and they set all the filming to this music. It was playing on set. When De Niro walks in, he can hear Morricone's music. So the music is absolutely cut through this film. He finishes the film, and it's his absolute masterpiece. And the fucking studio proceeds to absolutely ruin it. They say it's too long, it's confusing, people won't get it. The production company responsible for this is the Ladd Company, who, just for reference, also had a part in screwing over Ridley Scott's Blade Runner, so they've got form for this. They took the film out of Leone's hands. the 229-minute version was absolutely disemboweled by this process. They cut out the ending entirely. A lot of the stuff that happened in the 60s you just don't see. They shortened the film by 100 minutes and rearranged everything in chronological order. The final insult is the person they got in to carry out this hatchet job was the assistant editor on Police Academy. Police Academy. This is an utter desecration. The editing on this film is absolutely masterful by one of the best film editors of all time. And they bring in some absolute hack to tear this film apart. Okay? This notoriously bad version of the film was released in the US and understandably flopped. What is the point of this? Leone's proper version of the film was released in a number of places in Europe and got great reviews, but the damage was done. It completely failed at the box office in America. There was no push to release it widely anywhere else. It absolutely died on its arse, despite being an absolutely incredible film if you got to see the right version. Undeterred, although I'm sure he's very hurt by all of this, Leone spent the next 5 years attempting to make an even more ambitious film about the siege of Leningrad in World War II, but his health failed him and he died of a heart attack in 1989, which means he only made one film after the beginning of the 70s, after his great period with the spaghetti westerns and everything. We only got to see one more Leone film, but what a film. So that's my run through of the sort of plot and history of this film, and there's more and more and more that you can read about this. If you've not seen the film, watch the film, and then start reading, watching all the different interpretations. You know, is the ending real? Is it all a dream? What's a dream? What isn't a dream? So many things you could, it's not just a rabbit hole, it's a rabbit warren you can go down about this film. Now let's get on to the disc itself. I had to hunt around for this. This film's not been all that well served. There's been a few decent DVD releases back in the day, but since the era of Blu Ray, it's not had many great releases. I think they probably get snapped up really quickly. It hasn't had a big push. You would think that a film with this reputation would be one of the ones where you can just go on an online retailer or some shops still sell Blu-rays and go in and go, well, this should be there. Good, the Bad and the Ugly is there. Other De Niro films are there. Why not this one? But it isn't. So I've got DVDs of this. And you can watch Prime Video. I think that's actually moved to Disney Plus now, but there's digital and other versions of this available. But if I wanted my own Blu-ray copy, I had to hunt around. English or releases were very difficult to get, very expensive. I finally found this Italian edition. So the case says C'era una volta in America on the case rather than the English language title, which I think is the hipster's choice. It's released by Eagle Pictures, an Italian company. And in fact, this is not the 229-minute version. This is the 251-minute extended cut, which we'll need to get into a little bit. There's no other versions of this. It's one disc. There's no extras. It's just this special extended cut of the film. Now, that is a big thing because this was part of a big restoration project on the film, supported in part by Martin Scorsese's Film Foundation. So I'd not seen this version before. I'd only seen the kind of what we call the proper version. 229 minutes. I refuse to watch the 2-hour cut down US version. That's a disgrace. So this is very lovingly restored by an Italian company. Leone is revered in Italy, so it's a lot of effort's gone into the actual content of the film. Nothing in the way of extras, though. This is just the disc, and I think you have to take what you can get a little bit if you want a Blu-ray of Once Upon a Time in America. The reason we're talking about a Blu-ray is that there is no 4K disc available at the moment. There are rumours. Eagle Pictures, aforementioned, who are responsible for this release, they are rumoured to be working on one, but those rumours have been going around for over a year now, as at 2025. I don't know when we're going to see that. Hopefully we do. This extended cut includes 22 minutes of footage they've had to retrieve from various locations. Apparently there's another 18 minutes of footage which didn't make it into this one, so there is some sort of mythical 269-minute version out there. This is 251 minutes. The added footage on top of the version most people will have seen is not in the same good condition as the parts I've seen before. They've done a lot of work to restore it, but some of it is in very poor nick, to be honest. You can tell the different bits. It mostly extends or adds to scenes that are already in the film. The biggest addition, a lot of it, just certain scenes are longer, additional bits added, to the end of films, or you cut back to something later which kind of expands on something you've already seen. Nothing which really changes things. The one person got their part cut out. Oscar-winning actress Louise Fletcher plays the manager of the cemetery where Noodle's friends are buried, and has a brief moment with De Niro, but it's mostly plot exposition. So this is a no-frills disc, but from people who cared a lot about this film. So that's what you get. Let's talk about the video quality. And there's a couple of things to this. We'll have to address that kind of additional footage in a minute. I'm compared it to the DVD copy that I own. I also compared it to the streaming version that's available. Now, this has always been a great-looking film, even on VHS. The DVD was very good. There's lots of rich earth tones and period detail, which have always looked really good. There are some beautiful moments where they're at a nice beach resort where everything looks shiny and new. There's lots of scenes of like rough and grimy, New York, poverty growing up. Great scenes of the Prohibition era when they're living at large. All of which has always looked good. The digital version of Amazon Prime is HD. And it's okay, but it's 10 minutes shorter than the Leone original. I'm not sure what they left out when I watched that. It's probably part of that is the end credits they compressed. I'm not sure what else they did. It's streaming on Disney Plus now if you want to watch it. It's good picture quality, but it lacks depth because it's streaming. In terms of technical information, this film was shot on the 35mm Eastman film, which we've talked about a couple of times, on Araflex cameras. This is all very high grade and shot with great care and attention by Leone and his director of photography, which is why the films always look good. On this Blu-ray, it's mostly absolutely gorgeous, the best it's ever looked. It's vivid and rich in all the right places. The grimy poverty of the early days in New York is incredibly lifelike. The fact that Leone's camera lingers on all of this to give you the world in detail is brought out even more by this Blu-ray, especially the 1930s period, which is beautifully rendered. Now, at times this film's pretty ugly because there's a lot of blood-soaked violence, rape and other violence against women, torture. It's a gangster film. Horrible things happen. And it's a no-holds-barred view of how America was disfigured by organised crime and corruption. But Leone, without, in my humble opinion, glamorising that, has made a film which looks incredibly striking in every frame. It's really incredibly good to look at. And this Blu-ray, because of the love and care that's people put into it, has painstakingly captured that. There is grain because you want grain. It hasn't sort of made it so shiny that you've lost that kind of period feeling because they went to a lot of trouble to light it. The makeup, the costumes, the settings aren't all just shiny, space age, beautiful colour detail. The detail is proper, carefully rendered quality, and this Blu-ray's done a really, really good version of that. Here is the note of caution. This is the most complete version of the film that's available, like we talked about. The extra footage is noticeably not as good. It varies. The scene with Louise Fletcher in the cemetery is so dark, it almost looks like it's been like cut in from a VHS tape. It's really bad quality. The bits that they've done, been able to do more with, it still shows signs of damage. They put in a lot of effort to clean it up, but it does look different. Occasionally it throws you out because you go, I know that bit's not there. There's a scene where I don't think they had proper sound, so they've rendered it without dialogue, and it still works, but it does look different from the pristine 229-minute version, the basic 4-hour version. Do you need that extra footage? I don't know. Maybe one day there'll be a fully restored version with all that footage, but in terms of video, I mean, I'm glad they found the extra footage. It does give you more of a story that I love, and the whole point of the film is to be more complete. Yeah, so I get why they wanted to put it in. But if I talk about the 229-minute version that I've seen before, beautiful. The other bits, I'm glad it's there, and I'm not going to give it too much of a kicking for not being as good as the rest of the footage. I understand why it is what it is. So, in a way, a mixed bag, but this is a great Blu-ray, and let's not forget that. Now to the sound. There are a couple of different audio versions available on the film, only one in English, which is a DTS 5.1 mix, and it's very, very good. Blu-ray sound quality's always been good, and this is really strong. There are plenty of points to check how they've done the music and check your surround sound speakers. You've got roaring car engines, machine gun fire, explosions. Also, the shift from one time period to another has some really important jump cut edits, from a what looks like the turning turbines of a garbage truck in 1968 back to some machinery in a factory in 1932 or something. And that needs to be on point so that the roar of one to the other is carefully captured. And it needs to be on point, and it is. Even for the most part, the additional footage, which is clearly not as good sound, it holds up pretty well. And, leaving that to one side, the main sound of the main film, it's brilliant. Most importantly, the score. Now, Morricone's music is always gorgeous. This is him at his absolute pinnacle. You'll have heard him on things like The Untouchables, which is one of the most well-known films. You obviously heard the various kind of big, brash, music that he did for Good, the Bad and the Ugly. What he always does is use a lot of music that really conveys emotion and sadness. And there are some key themes in his score here, 3 at least, which represent people and times and certain moods. And they're so important. That's why Leone got Morricone to record the music and then have that music on set. And, Woods and De Niro and, Connolly as a girl and Elizabeth Govan playing the older version of Rebecca, they're acting to that score because it's that important. The music sets the tone, literally, and it's absolutely beautifully because you want to hear it. There's Cockeye's theme, which sounds like it's on some sort of woodwind instrument. When Cockeye, the character, plays it, it's on some sort of thing that looks like a harmonica or a small version of those kind of panpipe things that the South Americans used to play when they had novelty hits in the 80s. I don't know what you call that. You've got this really sort of swelling, desperately sad theme, which kind of sums up the damage that De Niro knows that he's done by the end. And all of that's really, really important, and the sound has to capture that. And of course, it really, really does. Maybe one day, if we got a 4K and someone really dug into that music, you'd get something that totally blows your socks off. But it's a really good, strong Blu Ray 5.1, good as anything. Morricone's music is front and centre as it should be, and absolutely no complaints. Really good quality sound. So overall, this film's a masterpiece. It's the greatest film ever made. It's not even about opinions. I'll stand and die on this hill that this is the greatest film ever made. So you must watch this film. This is a really good version to own it in. At the very least, you need to watch the 229-minute original version. It is, believe it or not, a better gangster film than either or both of the 1970s Godfather films. I'll stand up and argue that against people. I'm sure I've got loads of ammunition to try and prove me wrong. This is the greatest gangster film, the greatest film of all time. It's Morricone's best score. It's absolutely incredible. Nothing to say other than what a great film. You need to go and watch it. And once you've watched it, get into the depth and the themes of the film. Every time I watch it, I get something else out of it. So it's really, really important for me to own this film. Which kind of sounds like the question, is this an essential purchase, has already been answered. And I guess it is answered that it is an essential purchase. I certainly had to buy this. I needed to own this film on Blu Ray because I needed to. I needed to eat and live. But, this was really important for my collection. I do think that the original 229-minute version is probably better, especially given the quality of the added footage. So if I'd had the choice and it had been more affordable, there are some rare versions of that version of the film on Blu Ray which I just couldn't get hold of. If I'd had a choice between these two things all being equal, I might have bought that one. And obviously I'm going to keep an eye out for the promised 4K, and we'll have to have a discussion about that when it comes out. Will that 4K be a full restoration of all of this additional footage? I'm not sure if that's possible, but hopefully a 4K package would have a couple of different discs and you'd get the 229-minute original version on a beautifully restored 4K. That's my holy grail. So perhaps the best way to say this is that this is essential but not definitive. This is not the last copy of this film I'm going to buy. Put it that way. I will be looking out for a 4K, and probably if you have a choice, if you've been a fan of this film for many years, your curiosity will probably get the better of you and you'll want to watch the 251-minute version, and that's really good. I would probably say the 229-minute original version is still the best, and would probably say that's the most essential, the definitive disc that's available today, if it's available in your region. When the 4K comes out, maybe you get all versions, like a nice Criterion disc. I think, although Eagle doesn't do the Criterion thing, but hopefully they'll give you all the versions. But I think, maybe when we talked about Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid on this show, but for different reasons, the discussion about what version of this film to buy is probably going to keep running. So that's Once Upon a Time in America. This has been a huge one for me to do, a very important film in my kind of life of watching films. I hope you found it useful, enjoyed it. I hope it's helped you make your own mind up about buying this film. Thanks again for joining us on this show. If you like it, I hope you try out the Double Reel Film Podcast, and ways to follow the podcast and our socials will be up on the screen in a moment. Apart from that, I hope to see you for more physical media chat next time right here on Maximum Disc. The Maximum Disc YouTube channel is brought to you by Double Reel, the monthly magazine podcast for the discerning film nerd. If you like our celebration of physical media, please check out the podcast for more chat about the films we love and hate.